Welcome to another episode of ACF Podcast. Here we have Brett Jones with us, and welcome, Brett.
Mert, great to be on again, and looking forward to conversation today and a couple of my favorite topics.
So we're going to be talking about choose your own adventure, intuitive programming.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about how to combine iron cardio with other programs and what kind of results we can expect from the combination of those programs.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I'd say one of the most common questions with any program or protocol is, well, can I combine it, and how do I combine it with XYZ? Now, the harsh inner core of me says, well, just do the program. You don't need to add anything to it. But I get it. It's, because somebody like yourself that does some combat sports, or somebody that's involved in powerlifting, or, they have a goal max strength wise. And so how do you combine this with some of those other things? And it's a very adaptable program. And I think once we cover the intuitive nature, the how to combine answers will be easier to understand.
Mm-hmm. So let's start with intuitive programming. Why, instead of a more structured approach, do you propose intuitive programming?
So I joke in the book and have joked on other podcasts. Nobody sends me programs to experiment with because they know I'm not going to follow them. I've just traditionally been very bad at now. Have I successfully followed programs? Yes. When I was powerlifting, I followed. Now, even though I followed the program, I did tweak it a little bit because that was just how I operated. So it's a lot of the drive towards intuitive programming, and including that in iron cardio, was because that's how I train. And I can remember when I shot the video that's on strongandfit.com. I was talking to Mike Perry, a buddy of mine, and we were actually filming at his gym. And he's like, "What are you going to do for a warm up?" And I said, "I'm going to do exactly what I do for my warm up. Like, I'm not making anything up. I'm not. I could sit down and say, okay, do these 10 things to get ready for your session, or I could just show exactly how I get ready for a session." And so much of what's in the book and in the app and in the protocol is just exactly how I do it. So intuitive programming, and obviously 25 plus years of experience in both athletic training, coming up on 30 of experiences in athletic training and fitness / personal training, strength and conditioning. I've done a lot of programs and a lot of sessions, and so some of this is 30 plus years of kind of hard-won experience, and being a kid and trying to follow programs and maybe not getting the results that I thought I should have from those. So fast forward to now, and now I'm just very intuitive and adaptive, and especially coming back to training after cancer treatment. I had to be intuitive. I had to be adaptive. I tried a couple different ways to start my training again in the post-cancer time frame, and initially body weight only, and was like, I'm actually kind of not strong enough to really use my body weight effectively. And then I thought, well, swings and get-ups, and I'm actually not strong enough to be powerful yet. And so I needed to switch gears, and hence iron cardio, kind of came into being. But I also needed something that would adapt to what the day was going to give me. High energy days, low energy days, busy at work, not busy at work. All of those things needed to be accounted for. And I think that it's very interesting right now that there's an entire industry of recovery products that have cropped up. You can go look that up and see all the different options, from cold plunge tubs to things that inflate and deflate and compress, and I don't know. There's just a bunch of stuff out there for recovery strategies. But my viewpoint on recovery strategies has always been your first recovery strategy is proper programming.
Mm-hmm.
If you have programmed yourself appropriately, if you've run your session appropriately, you should recover from your training. Now, we all push a little too far sometimes. And I'll use this as a tool that when I know I have a busy, let's say I have a busy 2 or 3 days of work coming up where I know that I'm not going to be able to get a session in, or I'm traveling and I know I'm not going to be able to get a session in. Well, I'll do a couple high volume, higher intensity sessions before that time frame so that I know I can just relax and recover, over those 2, 3, whatever days that I'm going to be not training. So, but again, that comes back to kind of this intuitive nature of training to look at not only what the day is going to give you, but look at what the next 2 weeks are going to give you and say, all right, I can push a little here, maybe see how it works. And then, kind of switch and adapt. And always keeping in mind that if I run the session appropriately, if I program myself appropriately, I should recover from my training.
Mm-hmm. And do you think intuitive programming is superior to more structured approach for busy people, or do you think it's having some leeway in your program is optimal for almost everyone?
I think it's optimal for pretty much everybody. I definitely think it's, parents whose schedule can, change on a dime, an entrepreneur such as yourself that could end up with 5 different things happening in a day that you didn't plan for. You need to be able to spin on a dime and do something different with your training, or just accept the fact that session's not going to happen today. And it's okay. When you look at missing one session over a 3-month period, not a big deal. Now miss 20 or 30 sessions in that time frame, and okay, now we need to have a different conversation. But I in general, I just think everybody benefits from this idea that you can adapt to what the day, week, month, what life is giving you at the moment.
I mean, from my own experience too, I can say that this is a very good approach, because if I have a program and if I'm doing that program, I'm the kind of person, we're doing this and it needs to be done, so it will be done kind of thing. So if I'm deadlifting 400 pounds that day and I really don't feel like doing that, then I'll be doing that and I'll be breaking stuff. And I won't be able to train for a week or two because I tweaked something when I didn't recover enough, but it said in my program that I was going to go do this. Instead of doing that, now I can go light. I can go, I feel really energetic today. I can do a 40-minute session with a heavyweight. So I can go for that and recover over a few days of non-activity afterwards, as you described. I think that's a really good approach. But also there are some people that don't feel motivated when they are following a more intuitive program. I think
definitely there are definitely trainees, especially early on. Like one of the aspects of it's like talking to a musician, right? When you talk to a jazz musician that will go on these riffs of just intuitive music, and putting things together on the fly and being improvisational with what they're doing, there's a big background of structured practice of specific chords and specific music that sets them up for the ability to have the improvisation. There is an aspect of that in training, where if you hand me somebody that's brand new, who doesn't have experience with this, yes, I will structure their training in a very different way, because I know they need a format. They need to practice their chords before we can start really creating music or being improvisational. So there's definitely a step in the process there. And a friend of mine who uses iron cardio and intuitive and programming with his students kind of learned that the hard way. It made sense to him when we started doing it. And then he started applying it to other people and found out they kind of didn't have enough practice in yet to really be intuitive. And intuitive training, so you just highlighted one of the problems of a structured approach, right? Where it doesn't matter what your feelings are. The program says X, so you go in and try to do X. Might not be the best day to do that. Might turn out to be a great training day. Hey, both options are possible. Coin flips are still coin flips, right? They got about a 50% chance. But that is one of the problems with a structured program. Now, one of the problems with an intuitive program is this idea of, and I talk about it in the book, and from the concept of, if you always give yourself an out or you never give yourself an out, both ends of that extreme are a problem. And what I mean by that is there are days, like you just mentioned, where I don't care what you had programmed, you now need to choose something else because life, stress, energy, hydration, nutrition, whatever, has dictated this is a day where you should do something different. If you always make that choice to say, "Oh, I'm stressed. It's an easy day. Oh, maybe I'll miss today. Maybe, you're always giving yourself an out." Okay, that's a problem. Just as never giving yourself an out is a problem. And so in the midpoint, as you develop a little more intuitive nature on this, you begin to realize, okay, look ahead. What is the week going to give me? What are the training days that I know I can get in? What are the training days I'm hoping to get in? What do I feel like doing today? I personally have been working through a little bit of a shoulder situation. I've been getting a little bit of PT from a friend of mine, and it turns out it's kind of this big neck / startle kind of reflex sort of stuff that's been going on. And as I down regulate that, things are coming back, and I'm feeling good. So I've been doing a few different things in my own training because I train intuitively. So definitely you have a foundation of program structured work, but I think you should progress towards being able to be intuitive in your training and make training decisions that make sense.
And how do you gauge progress? I imagine how you do it, but how would you tell people how a beginner should gauge their progress doing an intuitive program?
Yeah, it's a great question because that's one of the benefits of a structured program, right? You have your percentages laid out. You know what you're going to do, and blah 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 blah. And you can either check the boxes or you can't. So within iron cardio in particular, and when you have all of these different options that are available to you, it's all variations on the same theme, right? So as long as you have a couple of baseline sessions, so let's just say classic, clean press squat, and traveling twos. Classic, traveling twos, clean press squat, traveling the twos, and you're tracking how long those sessions take you. You'll be able to chart progress. If you do your first 30 set session of that and it takes you 45 minutes, and the next time it takes you 42 and 40, and it continues to drop down, then you're making progress. Now, in the midst of that, you could be doing, maybe it was only 2 sessions out of that month were the classic. Maybe 2 were traveling twos. Others were rep ladders and alternating weights and adding a snatch or not. And there's a bunch of different versions that you can get into. But returning to those kind of baseline sessions and saying, okay, at this weight for this number of sets, I'm able to accomplish it in this amount of time. The other thing that I track is just RPE, rate of perceived exertion. And, like I said, I'm 20 plus years into swinging a kettlebell around, and like RPE for my press and everything is finally starting to make sense. So I'm not saying this is an easy conversation, and maybe I'm just slow on the uptake. But like I started to realize that as I was coming back from my cancer treatment, and the 24 was moderate to heavy weight, and that was all I was training with. Then I started to put the 32 in. Like the 32 made the 24 obviously feel lighter, and so now and I kept training with the 32 to the point where this is kind of starting to feel a little bit like the 24 does.
Yeah.
And now, prior to adjusting my training a little bit ago, like I was to the point where the 36 was feeling like a 32, and the 40 was beginning to feel more like a 36.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll reach those points with certain weights where you're like, man, this is really moving well. Like it just doesn't feel as heavy as it used to. That's a drop in RPE. And so if I'm able to accomplish, even if it's the same workload at the same amount of time, but the RPE drops, maybe it was a 7, now it's a 5 or 6. That's another way to gauge progress.
Yeah, because it's not apparent for some people, but when your RP drops, then you can do more sessions. Like you can, if it was an RP 9-10 session where you couldn't do any more, and then you would probably not be able to train the next day in most cases. But if you can drop it to RP 6, then yeah, you can do it every day or even twice in the same day.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the combining programs, because I think that people, gauging your output or monitoring or managing your output is a big part of combining programs. So we'll hop into that just a little bit more when we switch the conversation. But I think the important, and I sent the book and everything to a friend of mine who's a very structured trainee, and his comment back was, well, how do I know I'm not going to screw up? And I'm like, what do you mean screw up? Like, how do you screw up? Are you training consistently? Are you enjoying your training? Are you seeing progress? Then how are you screwing up?
Yeah.
Like but that's just me and the other thing to understand about, for me personally, I have no goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that may sound weird to people that are listening to this, that, how do you train without a goal? You have to reach a point, in my opinion, where you don't have the next goal. Because what do most people do when they're training? They go on a 6 or 12 week program, they see some results, and they hit the end of the program and they're like, well, what do I do now? And then you try to pick the next goal and the next goal and the next goal and the next goal. When you talk to a musician, and I always get the name wrong. It's a famous cellist. At the age of 90, he was asked why he was still practicing. And he said, because I think I'm starting to see progress. I'm starting to make progress. And this is a lifetime of practice with this instrument. Training needs to become the same way, where you're training because you have an enjoyment of training, not because this is the temporary thing I'm doing to get to this goal. This is the temporary thing I'm doing to get to this goal. This is the temporary, like that will fail. Believe it or not, you will run out of goals. Right? You'll reach a point where the next thing is just not, you're actually not that interested in achieving that goal. And so training kind of falters and peters out. I train because I enjoy training. I learn something with every rep. I am enjoying every set within reason. Are there days where I'm like, time to make the donuts, and I'm just kind of, that's an old US commercial for Dunkin' Donuts. So apologies for anybody that doesn't get the reference. But I just, and that's a big part of what ends up being with the intuitive training is you're training because you enjoy training. And you're training in a way that just allows you to pick something that you want to do for that day and continue to train. So yeah.
And running out of goals is actually a very real thing, because there is a limited amount of force your body can produce. So if you want to get strong towards a goal, but you're going to stop making progress at some point because physics. A person cannot lift 1,000 kilos off the ground. That's just not going to happen. And
unless you give me a good crane.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I think, I, at one point, I was the 11th person in the world to bend the red nail, and got really heavy into grip training and things of that nature. And that was actually very instructive to me towards this point, because you reach a point where the steel will win.
Mm-hmm.
Now, up to a certain point, there is nothing like the feeling of steel giving way to your strength.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. But you reach a point where the steel wins. And so you find those limits, and it's like, well, I can't really go much further because something's going to break. And now, having said all of this, having a goal is fine. If you set up a goal to do a BJJ tournament, if you set up a goal to do a powerlifting meet, if you set a goal to run a 5K, I don't care what the goal is. Setting a goal is awesome. I have set goals. I have competed in different things. I have looked to complete the red nail, the Beast Tamer challenge, I win the first TSC that we held back in October of 2002. I have competed. I have set goals. I have accomplished things. What I'm saying is that in the end, you can have those temporary things, but the long-term strategy is you're training because you enjoy training.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a joy in what you're doing. My wife will tell me all the time, you need a hobby. I'm like, I got one. It's my training. I really enjoy training. So yeah. So looking at combining programs.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and turn the page on the conversation. And I'm going to flip the script for just a second before we get heavily into it. Is that something that you've done as you've started to practice with iron cardio?
I started when I first looked at iron cardio. I said, "Oh, it's great, but it doesn't have this and that." So I had to add stuff to it.
Yeah.
And then I started that way, adding some bench presses, and the other thing was Turkish get-ups, and those are the things I've added. And after a while, I decided to do iron cardio as prescribed, without anything else, and I found that the other stuff I was doing was not really necessary, at least for that time. So I'm just doing iron cardio right now until I run out of progress. Because
Love it. And so it is, like I mentioned earlier, as we were getting started, probably the most frequent question that you get when you put a program out there is, how do I combine this? What can I add to this? So I get it. Common question. I think you can hop in and just follow the program protocol for a little while and see where it takes you, and then see what gaps you need to fill.
mm-hmm.
There will be gaps. No program is complete.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's part of life. That's part of training. So let's talk about a couple of frequent examples. One would be Pavel's Simple and Sinister program.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people will say, well, I'm pursuing Simple and Sinister. How do I combine in iron cardio? Cool. Easy. Alternate sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Do a session of iron cardio. The next day or next training session, do a Simple and Sinister session. If you're making that initial progress towards simple and you're training pretty much daily, yeah, just alternate sessions.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest way to do it. If you want to continue with the daily Simple and Sinister training, then 2 to 3 days a week, add a 15 or 20 minute iron cardio session.
Mm-hmm.
What starts to happen, what I started to realize, and I talk about this in the book, is as I was pursuing Sinister, you get to a point where you're completing your swings in like a sub 10-minute time frame. That's a pretty short amount of time to work. There's a lot of output in that short time frame, but it's a pretty short time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So the foundational work that you can do with a 30-minute iron cardio session supports the shorter efforts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an either or conversation. Runners do this to the extreme, and it doesn't need to be done this way. But you get somebody that's preparing for a 5K race, 3.1 miles. But they'll do 10 miles
mm-hmm.
to try to get ready for the 3-mile race. I think that's overkill. I don't think you need to be running 10 or 12 miles to get ready for a 3-mile race. But that's kind of, so other sports, other activities kind of have this cycling, has the junk miles kind of built in, where you're just going to go ride for 2 to 3 hours, and put the mileage in. So other sports have this. So I think those can be done better, but within the context of what we're talking about, that short effort, maybe more intense, shorter effort of the simple and sinister practice can be paired with a longer, more measured practice, accomplishing 30, 45 minutes of work. So you get this sustained work. Pavel has a great little tag for it. He calls it, should feel like manual labor. If you've ever enjoyed chopping wood or digging a ditch or doing any sort of manual labor, you know that you're going to pace yourself and sustain that effort over time, and it just feels rewarding at the end of the day. Well, that 30, 45-minute iron cardio session can be very much the same thing, where you have this sustained effort, manual labor feel to it. So that's one of the easiest examples, is simple and sinister. There's almost no modification needed. You can do little doses of iron cardio in the midst of doing the simple practice, or you can alternate sessions, and then just keep an eye on the overall recovery and things like that. How do I combine in my barbell work?
That's
other strength practice. Yeah, it's a more complicated conversation because of the focus on the overhead press within the iron cardio. You can end up in a situation where maybe you are trying to work on a barbell military press. Well, now I really need to monitor the effort and volume intensity that I'm accomplishing within the iron cardio, because now I have another overhead stress. So I need to pull back a little bit on both ends of that spectrum. I need to make sure I'm not going to be doing a lot of rep ladders and heavy iron cardio sessions if I'm looking to push my barbell military press. I'm going to let the strength, let the intensity, let the effort be there within that barbell work. So pull back just a little bit. Maybe I emphasize the squat within the iron cardio, where I'm doing a rep ladder, but for the squat, which would support everything else that I want to do. So the big thing now, if I'm working on a bench press, I just need to make sure that my shoulders tolerate the volume of overhead work with the volume of horizontal pressing. So it's all balancing. When you try to do everything, you only get to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
You don't get to do a lot of everything. And you shift that emphasis, right? It's investing. The market might be doing well, so you're pushing things into some stocks. Market's not doing well, you're pushing into some bonds. Bonds and market aren't doing well. I don't know, you're buying gold to set it aside. You shift where the emphasis is, and training is just very much the same way. If you have a martial arts practice like BJJ, Muay Thai, boxing, any martial art, if your goal is to pursue that art and that's where your focus is right now, then your training should support that, not take over that.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest mistake made when people start trying to combine in and work on multiple things is they're trying to push to a high level in their strength and conditioning practice, and they're putting in 2-hour classes in their martial art 3 or 4 days a week. That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Not within my lifetime, my lifestyle. Like I work a lot. I have different stress from work and life in general, and so all stress comes out of one bucket. There's not a stress for your training, a bucket for your training, and a bucket for your life, and a bucket for your martial arts practice. It's just one bucket, all the stress coming out of it. So you need to monitor how you're emptying that bucket. And so start with less,
and then add more,
and then add, and you'll find a point where it's too much. You get tired. You don't feel like you recover. Now you know where your max is for right now of volume and things you can tolerate and recover from, back off to about 80% of that.
Mhm.
Now vary between that like 65 to 85% of that total volume and just train consistently. And over time, that'll come up with you. So I wish I had more like simple, concrete answers, but this goes back to the intuitive nature of things, and being okay with the process.
Mhm.
Like I think people want bulletproof. They want this thing that's going to work for them.
All the time.
There's an old military saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Mhm.
Well, I hate to phrase it this way, but you're the enemy
Yeah.
of the program, right? Because life is going to happen. Stress is going to happen. Your nutrition, hydration, sleep, all of those things are going to vary. And you're going to have to vary the program. That's just life and the way that it works. So there you go. Little window into how to talk about intuitive training and combining programs.
I want to talk about this feature that we're working on, which is
Yep.
going to be very cool and very effective for situations like this. We're working on an objective measure of RPE because that's so hard to gauge on your own. But we're looking into analyzing your lifts to figure out what the actual RPE for that was. So it's very inaccurate when it's very low weights, but as we're getting to more near the maximal limit, it's being more accurate, but it's not fully done yet. But when it's done, I think it's going to be a very good tool for people to use in their training because they're going to be aware of what their training is doing for them. So they're going to be able to figure out their RPE without an imperfect measure. Sorry about the we're getting the cat problem again.
Cats are always welcome. Cats are always welcome. That sounds really neat. And like I said, I mean, I'm 20 plus years into throwing kettlebells around, and RPE's kind of really starting to make sense to me. And part of that is the consistency of the training and stuff like that. But having having an external measure that validates the internal measure, or at least gives some instruction as to, I know you didn't feel like that was a high effort, but according to what we're seeing, that was pretty high effort, or
Yeah.
vice versa. I think people are maybe more used to that conversation with heart rate based training. When you begin training and you don't feel like you're doing much, but your heart rate is freaking through the roof.
Yeah.
Then you get some conditioning in and you've spent some time. Now you feel like you're working really hard, but your heart rate's not where you need it.
Yeah.
And so that's another way to kind of talk about the conversation that people might be a little bit more familiar with the monitoring heart rate in training. RPE is kind of the same way.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying like the heart rate monitors are a really objective measure of your heart rate, and then we're trying to do the same thing for RPE, which is a very subjective measure of your efforts.
Love it.
And the worst thing about the heart rate thing is it doesn't work on strength training because your heart rate is going to go to 200 BPM for a very short amount of time, and it's going to drop back down to your resting heart rate very fast, and it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it's the conversation really changes when you're talking about pure cardiovascular adaptations. Talk about that in the book a bit, and maybe for a future podcast we can dive a little deeper down that rabbit hole.
There was something, now we're out of the subject. I think we discussed combining with different programs and also how to use these structured versus unstructured. But I really wanted to ask you, what makes the I'm sorry, I just had a bit of a blank mind there.
That's all right. It'll fill in here in a second.
Okay. I'm sorry. I had something that was really relevant to say, but I just completely blanked out on that.
That's all right. It'll come back. Write it down. We'll cover it. Cover it on a future podcast.
All right, so let's do that. So thanks a lot for joining us today, Brett. And
Thank you,
looking
Mert. Great to be on, and thanks to everybody for listening.
thanks a lot, and thanks to our listeners, and see you in the next episode. Okay. Whew,
End scene.
that was really cool. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Awesome. Yeah,
Oh.
it's good. And I think what we do for the next couple weeks is we just kind of keep knocking off a day like this where we just get a couple in the can, get Adam scheduled, get an email with him and maybe Mike Kurkowski and he might be a little tougher to schedule, but we get a couple interviews in, we cover the skill-based stuff, do the live coaching session, and then we have things that we can release, and maybe we just do one season of 12 episodes, whatever. But then that it lives forever on YouTube and whatever. So yeah, awesome.
There was something that I really wanted to ask you, but I really blanked out on that.
Oh, was it something about intuitive training or combining or heart rate or
I don't even know, but I knew the only thing I know about the question was really interesting and something I really wanted to ask you.
Well, it'll pop up at some point, probably 2:00 this morning.
Yeah,
and,
I'll write it down.
Yeah, exactly.
And
okay,
really,
so
thanks.
let's
Thanks a lot for the conversation. I think it was really cool.
It's great. Next week's a little tougher, scheduling wise. Monday's a holiday here in the States. Could probably do one. Well, if we did like 9:00 my time on either Tuesday or Wednesday, actually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we could get at least one recorded.
Okay.
So you guys pick what works best for you at like 9 a.m. in the middle of the week. And
Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday?
Wednesday or Thursday.
Wednesday or Thursday. Okay. I think we can do both. Let me check the schedule.
Well, Thursday will be a little weird. Wednesday is probably better.
Okay, let's do Wednesday the same time, 2:00 your time, right?
We started at 8.
Oh, sorry, no. Yeah, sorry, 8 your time to our time.
No, an hour later. It would be 9:00.
Oh, okay.
My time.
So I'll put it down for 4 p.m. our time. Okay.
Yeah, whatever an hour after we started today is.
Okay.
There we go.
Got it. I sent you the invitation. So let us know if you want to make any changes for the date.
Cool. And then we'll kind of look ahead next time and get the next couple scheduled, and that's when we'll try to get Adam on and stuff like that.
All right. So cool. And see you.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And you guys have fun out there, and we'll chat soon.
All right. See you. You
Awesome.
too.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.